Hey kiddos, welcome to Ecology Unit 10B Part 3. Okay, we are going to be talking about community interactions and ecological relationships. As we go forward, I want you to remember that you are going to be e-submitting this presentation, so you need to go to File, make a copy, then you can edit pages like this one right here. You're going to be coming back to this page and filling in all of the definitions before you e-submit this as a PDF into Blackbaud. Let's start off with the table of contents. In this lecture, we're going to be covering some major concepts, including ecological tolerance, niches and niche partitioning, symbiotic relationships, predator-prey relationships, and what it is to be a keystone species. So before we move forward, I want you to think briefly about what it would take, what type of conditions you would have to have in order to just survive, like most basic survival. You're probably thinking food, water, like an appropriate temperature and air, right? Like those are things that you would need to survive. But what would it take for you to thrive? What would it take for you to be able to do your best in a set of conditions? It might take things more like good food, lots of love, a comfortable place to sleep, nice clothing, right? Those are things that would help you to thrive. Similarly, organisms have a set of conditions in which they can survive. That's called their range of tolerance. And that's just to make them survive. However, they do have an optimal range of tolerance, an optimal range where they not just survive, but they also thrive, right? And that's where you typically will find most of an organism. For example, there's a range of tolerance and temperature that a polar bear has. That's going to be a lot different from the range in tolerance and temperature for a flamingo. Right? You're not going to find flamingos in the Arctic, and you're not going to find polar bears here in Florida, right? Because that would be outside of their range of tolerance. But they also have an optimal range. So although flamingos might be able to exist from like Georgia to some parts of South America, you're only going to find them very close to the equator because that's where the temperature is going to be the best and make them the happiest. And because they're doing their best and they're happiest, they're going to have more healthy offspring, and you're going to find the majority of the population in that area. So that range of tolerance is going to help to determine the habitat that you're going to find an organism in, right? So if it's a tropical organism, you're going to find it in a warm climate, right? If it's an aquatic organism, you're going to find it in water, right? But that habitat is oftentimes shared with a variety of different organisms. So how is it that you can have so many different organisms living in the same habitat? It's because they do different jobs in that habitat. They eat different foods, they live in different places, they make their nests or their homes in different places, right? So you can have these different aspects of an organism that will kind of play into its niche that it holds within the ecosystem. So a niche is not just where an organism lives, but also what it does where it lives. Okay? And this is really good because if organisms didn't occupy different niches, then we would all be highly competitive against each other. And there's this concept in ecology called the competitive exclusion principle. And pretty much what it says, if two species are trying to occupy the exact same niche, they're going to compete so hard and for so long that one of them will outcompete the other one, and the other species will either die or have to adapt to a different niche. So we find that even similar species will have tiny changes to their behaviors or their habitat so that multiple species can all occupy the same habitat. For example, let's look at this tree. Right? So on the left-hand side, you see it's sunny and dry. On the right-hand side, you see it's shady and moist, right? And just based on a slight preference, maybe this little lizard over here is going to do better in a smaller tree on a sunnier area, and this lizard over here is going to be at the top of the tree in a moist area. Now, although they're similar and their species are probably evolutionarily related, they're able to occupy slightly different niches so they all can inhabit the trees of this forest without heavy competition. I am going to ask that you take a moment and you watch this video. It's really interesting and it's a great example of niche partitioning in a real ecosystem. The next thing that we're going to talk about is competition, right? So I said there's this competition for resources. Although that's not the only interaction between species, I do want you to recognize that it is an interaction between species. So for this slide, what I would like you to do is I would like you to go, you're going to Command C this, right? And then you're going to Command V, and you're going to create a little extra happy face, sad face, or smiley face, or you can move one of the ones along the bottom. In this case, competition is the only one where at least one organism is not happy. In competition, you have sad face, right? So competition, nobody wins. And until one organism outcompetes the other and is able to occupy that niche by itself, both are going to be unhappy, both are going to be under stress, right? Mutualism, however, is when two organisms in a symbiotic relationship, meaning a relationship that's very close, a close interaction. And in mutualism, organism 1 is a happy organism, and organism 2 is also a happy organism. So this is a situation like the acacia ant, where they live in the thorns of the acacia tree, and the acacia tree feeds them nectar, and then the ants protect the tree and keep all other plants away from the tree. They'll sting the plants that try to grow close to the tree, and they'll make sure that the tree has no competition for sunlight, right? That's a mutualistic relationship. I'll give you a home and some food, and you protect me, right? Perfect. Parasitism, we talked a little bit about parasitism already. So parasitism is going to be a happy face and a sad face. Think fleas, think tapeworms, think things that are going to kind of suck blood or body fluids and get nutrients from their host, and they're going to harm their host, but usually they don't kill it, okay? The other type of interaction that organisms can have is a commensalistic relationship. In a commensalistic relationship, one organism is happy, the other one's like, meh, I don't care. We talked about the remora fish and sharks, and how the shark, it tears into its food, and it rips apart little tiny pieces, and then the remora fish are going to eat those little pieces. The shark doesn't care. The fish get a meal. They're happy. The shark isn't hurt, right? And then the last interaction we're going to talk about is predation. Predation, or the predator-prey relationship, is when one organism is happy and full and the other organism is, in fact, dead, right? That's a pretty rough relationship right there, okay? But it's also a very important relationship, because without predators culling out the herds and eating the weak or the sick, then populations in general would just get weaker. So it's actually good for the environment. Now, although all interactions are really important, I do want to note that some species are just more important than others. And that's not just me being biased. It's, in fact, an ecological concept called keystone species. So even though food webs are complex, and oftentimes if one species disappears, the whole food web itself will be fine. In some cases, if one species disappears, it heavily impacts the entire food web. So think of, say, a coral reef, right? A coral reef provides food, habitat, protection for a variety of marine species, thousands of marine and pelagic species, because it acts as nurseries for deep sea fish, right? If you took out the coral reefs, the whole habitat is going to go down. That's going to impact fisheries, because the deep water fish are not going to have a place to raise their babies, and that's going to impact all of the reef organisms as well. So that would be a keystone species in a reef. However, we didn't realize this, but in Yellowstone, we hunted wolves to extinction. And then we reintroduced the wolves to try to rebalance the ecosystem, and the most amazing thing happened, because we didn't realize it, but wolves were a keystone species. Go to the next slide, and I'd like you to pause, then watch the video. Okay, so pause my lecture, go back to your presentation, watch the video, and then come back to me. I'm hoping that you made some connections between how the biotic factor of adding the wolves changed other biotic factors, but then also influenced abiotic factors, non-living components of that ecosystem. It's such a really cool and interesting story. And it's not the only time we've seen this. We've seen sharks are a marine keystone species. If you take out the shark, then they aren't going to be a predator that takes out, for instance, the crown-nosed rays. Then the crown-nosed rays eats all the crustaceans, and then not having the crustaceans impacts the primary producers, so the whole ecosystem starts to crumble. Another prime example of a keystone species is the sea otter. So way back in the day, we hunted the sea otter almost to extinction. We really loved sea otter coats, right? But what we didn't realize is that the sea otters were really important for keeping down the sea urchin population. When the sea otters were gone, the sea urchin population went through the roof, right? Skyrocketed. And then they started eating all of the holdfasts of the kelp. So the kelp in, like, say, California has these holdfasts where they hold on to the rocky substrate of the ocean right there. And if you eat it, it's like eating the roots of a plant. The kelp just kind of floats away. So without the kelp and the kelp forest, all of the fish that lived there died off. And once again, the ecosystem started to collapse. When we reintroduced the otters, the ecosystem and the kelp beds were able to recover. Now, 3 of the keystone species that we just reviewed were predators. And that's because that predator-prey relationship is so incredibly important. Not only does it, as I said earlier, cull out the herds and get rid of the weak and the diseased and the old, right? But it also has an important impact on keeping prey species down. Like, for instance, if you have a lynx and it's eating the bunny rabbits and you take out all the lynx, then the bunny rabbits might eat at all of the primary producers, which would then impact all of the other herbivores, right? So it's really important that predators keep prey populations down. There is this relationship between populations that we oftentimes see in these really close predator-prey relationships, and that is that as the prey population increases, right, the predator population is going to increase because they have more food. And then the prey population is going to decrease because there's too many predators, right? And then the predator population is going to decrease because it doesn't have enough food. And then the prey population is going to increase because there's not that many predators. And then the predator population is going to increase because there's more prey. And then that cycle continues. So it continues over a long period of time. Why don't you pause for a second, take a moment, and explain what I just said in your own words to the right. Now, to finish off the lecture, I'd like you guys to play this little game. I found it's so much fun. You can go to the more interactive game after you do this activity and mess around for a little while if you want. It's kind of fun to see different structures that you can play with on the organism and how that impacts their population growth and their survivalship. But for now, what I would like you to do is you're going to go ahead and turn me off. You're going to you're going to play the game here, or you can click right here, and that's going to take you to the game. I want you to go into the little component that says intro, and then you're going to click add a mate. So then you're going to wait 3 generations. So after 3 generations, then I want you to put in here like what happened at time 0, 1, 2, and 3. Then you're going to click the box next to the wolves. You're going to wait for the wolves to come. You're going to let that just go for 1 generation, and then I want you to hit pause and describe what happened here. Then you're going to explain what you think will happen over a period of time, given evidence from the activity. Okay, so just follow these directions. Okay, you're going to record the stuff that it asks you to record, and when you're done, you're going to save this all as a PDF, and you're going to e-submit it into Blackbaud. Thanks for being so patient with the lecture. I'll see you soon, kiddos.